Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts are going to share strategies that agencies can implement to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's panel discussion. Before we begin, I would like to welcome all of our attendees and give a special thank you to Shayna Williams, Michelle Garman, Tim Winters, Tom Mahoney, and the entire Appgate and Optiv ClearShark team. This afternoon, we're going to hear from our panelists during a Q&A session, and we're also going to pop up a few polls throughout, so please be sure to respond to those in order to receive your CPE credit. With all that said, I'd love to welcome all of our panelists to go ahead and come on camera and come off mute because we're going to do a quick round of introductions. If we could share with us who you are and what you do at your agency or organization. Colonel Hartman, if you could please begin.
Yes. So, hi, I'm Travis Hartman. Actually, I just retired a couple weeks ago, but I was the Chief Technology Officer at Army Forces Command, and we were responsible for generating the combat ready forces for the U.S. Army. About 750,000 people in that organization. And prior to that role, I was at Army Cyber Command, where I was Chief of Defensive Cyber Operations and had the group of architects in the organization that worked for me there.
Great, thank you. Congratulations. And let's hear from Dr. Watchorn next.
Greetings, my name is Dr. Merrick Watchorn. I work for the Department of Air Force Chief Information Security Officer under the provisos of the Chief Information Officer. Within that construct, I'm the Chief Cyber, Quantum, and Cognitive Information Services Architect. I specialize in trying to figure out how we're going to make ourselves quantum resistant. One of the first key tenets inside the Zero Trust principles that we are trying to espouse currently is how we integrate that into a quantum resistant approach. So for us, the beginning of any quantum resistant architecture is by doing Zero Trust first. So we are actively involved in helping to craft that out from a structure standpoint and also creating the auditing requirements in order to prove that we've effectively deployed what we've been asked to do by both NIST, the DoD, and the Congress and Senate.
Fantastic, thank you. We'll go to Dr. Drini next.
Hey, good afternoon. My name's Harry Draney. I'm the artificial intelligence subject matter expert supporting the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. So my job is to manage a portfolio of projects as well as monitor the integration of AI into existing and legacy systems.
Thank you. And then Jay, can you introduce yourself next?
Thank you. My name is Jay Bonsi. I am the general manager of the systems and data portfolio at Clarity Innovations, and also an Appgate advisory board member. Prior to that, I was the chief technology officer for the Department of the Air Force, where I helped create department-wide roadmaps and execution plans for the enterprise services that support zero trust architectures. Like Dr. Watchorn, I was also in the office of the CIO, and so it was our job to kind of set the vision for the department, get strategies out, manage the finances for enterprise services, and then help the field execute.
Wonderful, thank you. And then Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Zeintek. I'm currently the field CTO at Optiv ClearShark. My career also started in the U.S. Air Force. I then worked as a government contractor in the intelligence community before serving at the CIA. After that, I moved into the private sector and worked at Palo Alto Networks. And now here at Optiv ClearShark, I focus on cybersecurity strategy and architecture, focused across all the federal government, but with still pretty detailed focus into the intel community. And I'm very excited to be here today and looking forward to today's discussions.
Thank you. So I want to start off with, we'll circle back to Travis. If you could kick us off discussion question number one, what governance and oversight structures have you found are most effective when it comes to driving zero trust maturity across multiple services and partners?
Okay, well, that's a nice, easy, non-complex one. First, I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with the Army on this. So the Army had, I'm just going to go with like a dozen different networks. And those networks had various sets of security controls, different monitoring challenges. So there's been a multi-year project that's pretty well wrapped up, bringing those 12 networks all into one larger environment. So that's been called OrbNet Convergence. And by bringing those together, then that provides one area to be working through while Zero Trust is getting rolled out. That doesn't mean that nothing was happening until all of it was consolidated, but the biggest crux was getting it together and doing some control, some of the steps towards Zero Trust in stride, but not ending up with let's do 12 different things and now try and collapse all of those and bring all that policy enforcement together. With that, of course, through Cyber Command, lots of collaboration with other services, but I'm sure some of our other panel members will be able to talk more about that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Harry, let's go to you next. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that first question?
Yeah, thank you. So from my perspective, at the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, most of the things that we focus on, discuss, and work on are focused for the tactical edge. So, my responses and input is with a focus on supporting that warfighter, on the edge with limited resources, limited bandwidth, and limited size, weight, and power in which to deal with. So with regards to governance, oversight structures, and effective ways for doing this across multiple services and platforms. So you can think about um, for our perspective, we have to deal with a number of different capabilities, not only across the service of the Marine Corps, but across the other services. So joint applications, as well as being able to integrate and work with our coalition forces. So, we have to look at things like proxies and different types of gateway solutions that can sort of wrap our legacy capability, our legacy technology, with some sort of layer on the outside that translates from the language it was designed to understand to the language that others service capabilities speak. So in order to do that, we have to sort of figure out how to create that translation layer, which is a lot easier said than done, as you can imagine. And when we think about working with legacy systems, and the way to sort of reduce the complexity is to to basically micro segment what we're doing. So focus on the specific thing that we're trying to accomplish. So if you're sick, you treat the symptom and not the sickness. So it's not necessarily the best way to do it, but it's sort of the way that it's the proven kind of workaround when dealing with some of these differences and complexities that we have to do. So so as I focus on my responses on the tactical edge, we realize that it's not how to systematically fix what we're doing. It's simply addressing what we have to do in order to be efficient and successful with the current mission on that tactical edge. So I felt like I rambled, but hopefully that made some sense.
No, thank you. I appreciate you, both of you, for sharing those perspectives. I'm actually going to call for a first poll question. If ATARC could please put that up on the screen. And again, this is for our audience back at home. So we want to know from you all, which of the following do you feel best describes the primary advantage of identity-driven architectures in a zero trust model? Please respond to that. We've got stronger defense of the network perimeter, improved mission resilience and flexibility in hybrid environments, simplified compliance reporting only, and reduced reliance on any user authentications. So if you're interested in what those results have to say, ATARC will post them up here momentarily. But I want to jump into our next discussion question. Jennifer, I was going to call on you next. This one is, how do identity-driven architectures improve mission resilience compared to the traditional perimeter-based security models?
Absolutely. Yeah. First off, I did want to say that I still believe that perimeter-based security is still important. to us. However, when I think about this, I like to look at analogies, and I like to compare secure enterprises with gated communities, just because I think people can get their head around some of those things. I need to have, if I want to go to a gated community, right, I need to have the gates, and I want passcodes to get in there, potentially guards. But just because I have that perimeter setup doesn't mean that I'm going to let anybody who gets into my gated community just walk into my household, right? Or any of the other households. You're still going to want to have locks on your doors. You're still going to want to have things like alarms, window locks, cameras, like a number of different things to make sure that, again, once you're inside the first gate, that perimeter, you're still doing identity, like in a way. You think of identity, it could be a passcode, it could be a key, anything that provides your identity, biometrics, of course, user IDs, anything like that provides your identity. But to take that analogy further, even if I let somebody into my house because I verified their identification once again to say, yes, you can have access to my house as a resource, I'm still not going to put my valuables out on the table and say, hey, take a look at what I have in my house. I'm going to put those in locked cabinets. I'm going to put them in a safe. There's a lot of things that I'm going to take care of. I also, inside my household, I might have various cameras or things to make sure that there's not theft going on if I have things that are super valuable. So there's a lot of different layering of identities. And I think the more finite you can get in your identity, the more resilient you can be within your mission. And so that's where I think that you have to have more than just a perimeter. I still think it's important, but I definitely think you need to layer on more of those identification sources in order to get more of that resilience from there.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Jay, I was hoping to hear from you next on this one.
Sure. So when we look at the modern mission space, where kind of resilience and flexibility and ability and mobility is increasingly important, it becomes harder and harder to define a perimeter. And where you have maybe you have units out in the field, or you have, and it doesn't even have to be military context. It could be disaster response or anything where you have people who are out and doing things. It becomes harder to know which of those entities should be within that sort of perimeter ring. And so moving towards an authenticated model for all traffic accomplishes a few things. First off, it allows you to verify and add kind of nodes to your network as that perimeter shifts, and really helps you meet the dynamic challenges of a conflict or a disaster or whatever it happens to be. And it also allows you to go deeper inside the services themselves to help isolate individual services and really enforce least privilege, instead of, there is that north-south traffic of whether or not you're in or outside of the ring, but there's also the east-west traffic where, different software components or different, applications should or should not be able to talk to each other. And those create perimeters so that when those components get breached or misbehave in some foundational way, then that identity baseline provides, as Jennifer said, that extra set of locks inside the house. So, and there are a number of techniques to do this. It differs between between sort of person entities and non-person entities, but broadly moving past just like static firewalling, is there. Now, that said, again, to Jennifer's point, having, a robust perimeter in the form of firewalling or other coarse network controls like that is obviously a good idea, right? It's something that you want to layer on top of any other approach that you have. It is necessary, but not sufficient.
Thank you, Jay. Any other comments from our panelists that we have online based on what's been shared so far? Just before I move on to the next question, I want to make sure everyone's gotten a chance to share what's on their mind. All right, well then I'm going to call for the next poll question before we move on. So if ATARC could post poll question number 2 up here. Question asks our audience, again for your CPE credit, what role does automation play in scaling zero trust adoption across agencies? I don't know if I have the poll question up. Okay, there we go. I see it now. So again, what role does automation play in scaling zero trust adoption across agencies? And your options include eliminating the need for governance and oversight, enabling faster, consistent enforcement without overburdening IT systems, replacing all human decision-making in cybersecurity, or reducing the risk for measuring outcomes of metrics. Atark, please keep that on the screen for a little bit longer just to ensure that our audience had an opportunity to respond. And with that, Dr. Watchorn, it looks like we've got you back. I was going to go to you next, but let me just make sure you're there. Is your audio working?
Yes, ma'am. I'm able to call in on a cell phone. Sorry about that. Apparently, Verizon has started its zero trust mitigation today and has shut down all of its internet services.
How timely. Well, Merrick, I wanted to ask you this next question here, which is what role does automation play in enabling scalable zero trust enforcement without overburdening IT teams? If you want to dive into that topic next.
Absolutely. So I think it's a fundamental shift in how we think about the burden that compliance puts on the average everyday mission owner and mission user. Traditionally, we've been very document orientated, and we have not actually started to embrace some of the new emerging technologies that we're beginning to see come to fruition. This can include the use of large language models to help us understand the complexities of different compliance structures, which then allow us to make better understanding of policy and/or enforcement modalities. It allows us to retarget and actually use automation techniques to collect the forensic evidence that we need in order to make it as a background service rather than a front-end service. And so a perfect example of that would be the implementation of OSCL. OSCL allows us to implement security monitoring for continuous monitoring, active defense, MITRE ATT&CK framework, and various different things that we have to do in order to meet federal compliance, governance, and oversight requirements, both established by the DoD and our seniors appointed above us. However, we've traditionally gone out, like I said, to do a paper route. So if we were to go back and think about not trying to recreate the paperwork trail, but actually go and get the automation that we need that actually is the fundamental goal of what Zero Trust does, which is to effort the data collection of the evidence to make it as a pass-through, we can increase the throughput. A perfect classic example is instead of playing the fetch or rock with our system owners, the idea at the DAF was to start giving upfront all of the potential steps for the risk management framework so that we could cut anywhere between 3 to 6 months out of the chain for rapid acquisition, rapid implementation, and then rely on both the CSSPs and the Zero Trust implementation as the provided way to collect the evidence so that we could then go faster so we wouldn't have to be slowed down so much with paperwork and paper drills. So from an automation standpoint, it's the removal of all of the paperwork and actually getting to, we're monitoring the system, we're doing it in an active defense way, we're doing it with a continuous monitoring. This is where the continuous authorization to operate, or the CATO process, begins to shine out. Because what happens now is that we can sit there and do it at the machine language operational speed by the human's ability. Now, obviously, we're still going to have requirements where we see something that's a little bit odd, and that's where we would use a human. But instead of having a human review every package and be involved in every part of the process, we need to begin to leverage these automation capability tools in their naturalistic environment in order to get us through the finish line faster and produce the amount of burden that's placed onto the mission partners that are just trying to do their operational requirement needs. So from our standpoint, inside the CISO shop and inside the CIO shop, these are some of the things that we've begun to undertake in order to go faster so that we can fail quicker more often, but in a secured manner by relying on the Zero Trust modality to protect us from a mistake that may have been occurred, but it's an honest mistake, not an intended mistake. Hopefully that helps out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Jay, can we hear from you next on this?
Sure. So really, at the end of the day, Zero Trust is down to the sort of individual architectures and individual technology deployments that each mission system has, right? It's about implementing it correctly, whether or not that's RBAC or ABAC controls based upon user identity, whether or not it's proper segmentation of your workload, whether or not it's making sure that your logs are being monitored. And and any enterprise, even moderate scale, the strategy is largely centered around enterprise services that relieve a lot of that burden, right? And to Dr. Watchorn's point, some of the things that support continuous ATO, like machine readable configurations, like continuous monitoring, those sorts of things are often best provided as enterprise services, and that's really where you get the scale of sort of implementation leverage necessary to roll these things out, right? We don't want 1,000 applications rolling their own identity solution. Not only is it inconvenient for users, it's difficult to manage, and you would rather have an enterprise single sign-on that's backed by an entitlement management service, right? And that gets you really far down the road to be able to have a zero trust architecture. And so that scale is typically provided by those key and core enterprise services, so that and it's more efficient from a budgetary standpoint. It's more efficient from a technology implementation standpoint, because you have to do it correctly one time. Now that single enterprise implementation is a lot trickier because you have to meet a wide diaspora of use cases, but it is kind of like that one true core strategy. The other side of that scale is in the monitoring and active cyber defense elements. And so understanding your traffic. Zero trust inherently costs more because you are monitoring events that you weren't monitoring before, and you're adjudicating things that you weren't adjudicating before, right? If you just sort of let anybody in to the front door and they have total back-end access to the internet, then you're just you aren't checking those locks. And so being able to meet the scale of the monitoring and the SIEM and SOAR, depending on your shared responsibility model, to be able to execute at those cyber events is really key for kind of creating that economic leverage of cyber defense, where a single bad actor with a laptop can't run you millions of dollars in analysts and SIEM fees. So there's getting that scale right at the enterprise level is kind of the dream of every CIO, whether or not you're public or private sector, and is absolutely necessary to invest in to kind of move to the zero trust future.
Thank you. Harry, can I pull you into this conversation as well? I think you wanted to add something to this topic.
Yes, thank you. So, again, from my perspective, like thinking about how to do this at the tactical edge. So I'm going to take the question maybe a little step forward, to not only include automation, but artificial intelligence. When we have to go into an area, an operational area, and we have to establish our own infrastructure, there are things that you will have to do in order to become secure and safe, right? So from this zero trust mentality, the infrastructure that we bring in needs to be compatible with local authorities. So whatever that is, whether it's a military force or a police force or whoever that we're working with, there's going to be an expectation that we're going to have to integrate into their systems. And so the use of automation, or in my case, artificial intelligence, to help figure that out, like to embed easily understandable code that basically alters the infrastructure and creates a framework that allows us to not only now integrate with local authorities, but with joint and coalition partners as well. So now that we have this sort of common architecture and framework, as we move forward and make changes to any of those capabilities that we're bringing to the fight, we are now able to make those in parallel, make those changes to the architecture and framework that is consistent across the local authorities, joint and coalition partners. The last thing I want to bring up in this kind of situation that automation and artificial intelligence could significantly help is being able to, like, we don't have large teams, right? That'll IT teams that'll be working on the edge. So having the ability to have a self-healing capability. So using artificial intelligence to be able to find issues that's occurring and be able to attack those issues and do this self-healing capability is something that will be important to us as we move forward with zero trust and the tactical edge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right, so moving on now, Jennifer, I'd love to hear from you next on lessons that can be learned from early zero trust deployments that could help accelerate adoption across the federal enterprise.
All right, thank you, Kirsten. Yeah, I think what we heard from a lot of people here just in this recent question, right, was that, we don't have as many of our personnel. Personnel can be like all over the place. And so not having all the resources all the time makes you, I think people have gotten overwhelmed with the idea of the zero trust architecture and having to do this very large architecture that has a lot of pieces in it. And I heard this statement early on in my career called think big, start small, move quickly. And to me, that really sat with me for a long time. And when I talk to my customers now, even though the architecture might have a lot of moving parts and it might be very big and overwhelming, the idea is that you really just want to think about what your overall architecture is going to be and then pick pieces to start small. Pick pieces that you can accelerate and get things done quickly. And I think that's one of the lessons I would have learned looking at people is they tried to bite off a lot more than they could all at once. And then that caused them to actually be a lot more of a slowdown and it became a lot more complicated. And if you start to look at technologies as things that are very modular, things that have good integrations amongst the different various tools, that's something I preach a lot with most of my customers is make sure that the technologies that you're looking at, the vendors that you're looking at, have those abilities to have very good integrations, things that don't just integrate with themselves, but integrate across many different open architectures using extensible APIs, things that help with automation. You're looking for technologies that are pushing the boundaries. And so those are a few things I think you need to start looking at and looking at it as a kind of picking key focus areas and then allowing yourself to get some momentum when you start to quickly see some value over some of the changes you're making. And I think when you see that, it helps you continue to move on. The other thing that I wanted to add here is that I think that I've seen a lot of customers who will start with a technology or start working down an area and they're running into issues or it's not working, which is fine. But I think you need to allow that failure, accept that failure. I think that's something that we have a hard time with sometimes in our community is accept that failure and then move on. Realize that that doesn't work for your environment. Realize that that might not be the best place to start right now. Accept that, pick something else, reset your focus and move on. And I think if you do that, I think if organizations allow for that, that is something that can help you accelerate that adoption and move quickly, within that zero trust deployment.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective, Jennifer. Travis, I'd love to pull you into this conversation now too. Same question or just anything that you want to riff off of what Jennifer shared.
Yeah, well, so absolutely. So the early zero trust deployments and some of those lessons there. I'm going to say there's some similarities to other tech deployments. Getting a core group of users that are maybe going to be your pilot users, able to give you feedback from that. Having admins that are trained up on what they're going to be managing with that technology, determining which systems are going to go through that. And certainly in any large complex organization, you can't do an entire enterprise, forklift shift to zero trust tomorrow morning when we all come in. I suppose you can, but they will be hiring a new CIO and CTO before the end of the day. And so we talked about the systems, the users, the admins. Also, we're working with the other internal teams that are being involved, the security monitoring team. What they're going to be receiving from various sensors, what's actually happening. It's changing for them as well as what's changing for the admins of that zero trust environment. Being able to work on how that alerting might might change how maybe they're able to turn off some other sensors and what those criteria will be as various systems get moved into the zero trust. As you get the very granular policy enforcement points, that's going to increase some of what is getting audited. And of course, what is any great conversation without throwing out AI? But certainly using that to increase your use case testing as you have various users, because you're not relying on human speed to do stuff, and you could do it at scale by just throwing more processor time against it.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. Would anyone else like to add anything to the conversation here? Jay, did you want to add something?
So one thing I'll add to the conversation is that zero trust and zero trust rollouts are integration hell, right? And whenever you have an entire field or entire enterprise that you're trying to uplift, especially in the public sector space, making sure that you are planning for enablement services and the cost of enablement. Often these plans and programs have been established years ahead of time, and needing to adopt those technologies can be really challenging, and you're kind of left scrambling to find sustainment budget to be able to execute on those priorities. So, whenever you are planning a large enterprise uplift, making sure that there is a pot of money available to help support the eaches that need to either come into an identity solution and rework their application, or whether or not you have to do a cloud migration, or whether or not you are changing to some unified boundary or delivery service, right? Any one of those integrations has a cost. Some of them can be kind of minor, especially on the identity side. It can be quite pricey to rework applications to work in a more robust identity world. So what I found is creating that sort of tech enablement fund locally, and then having associated like a pool of enterprise labor to be able to go application by application and system by system, and roll that out. Again, taking those small steps, as Jennifer alluded to be able to get those services to adopt, and tracking those metrics appropriately.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other comments from our panelists before we move on? We have a little bit of time if anyone wants to add anything else. Okay, then I'm going to ask for poll question number 3, and this is our final poll question until the very end of this webinar, so still stay around for the last question, but poll question number 3 should be up here on the screen momentarily. Again, for anyone who's just joining us, this is to receive your CPE credit, so be sure to respond. Poll question number 3 asks, when budgets are constrained, which investment areas should be prioritized to advance zero trust maturity? Is it advancing identity and access management, extending physical security infrastructure, legacy perimeter firewalls, or outsourcing governance structures? So please take a moment to respond to that. And if you're interested in what our audience has to say, the responses should be up there on the screen momentarily. But with that said, Jennifer, I would like to bounce back to you here for my next question on how should agencies prioritize investments in zero trust capabilities when budgets are constrained? So big topic.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm just going to sort of circle back to some of the things we were talking about previously on the previous question, which is, I think, and Jay mentioned this as well, which is integrations, right? Integrations are difficult, but they're also very necessary when you want to when you have budgets constrained, right? You want to get the most out of the products that you have in place. But with that is also consolidation, right? I think people have a number of different products and they've layered a number of different things, and sometimes complexity doesn't actually bring you the results that you're looking for. So I would try to simplify sometimes and bring in more consolidated tools, but really, again, work on those things that have very good networks of integrations. You will see across the sort of the vendor landscape, there are vendors that have very good integrations across a number of different industries, right? And then there's some that maybe don't have as many good integrations. And I would shy away from the ones that only integrate with their own tools, right? And look for the ones that are a lot more open. Because I think you gain more value from your investments that way. And I would also look for, when you're prioritizing your own budgets, look for the things that you already have in place. You know, and you'll be able to see a focus of some of the things that you need to have, where your holes are, and try to focus maybe on just on the smaller holes, as opposed to trying to, again, pick off that big piece. But with that, I would also look at prioritizing more of your key assets over trying to do a blanket protection of security over the whole organization. I think a lot of times we're looking for certain check boxes of things that you need to have. And if you have a limited budget, I would say to first focus on those key assets, the things that you really need to make sure do not leave your environment. So those would be your focus areas to spend the most attention, the most money on. And then also just talking with, you know, some of the things both Jay and Harry have mentioned is with that automation is another key place where you can actually start to really work on your budget, is that if you're looking at integrating some levels of AI and some levels of automation, you can save budget in some of your resources. So you want to have, say, your lower level analyst type people, maybe not dealing with everything, every small piece that they need to do, that you can automate. So once you know that you have a repeatable thing that every one of your analysts is doing, you can automate that function. You can get AI to give you a little bit more information about some of the things that you might miss when it brings all that information into one model. And so by using some of those pieces of automation and AI, I think you also have the ability to enhance your lower level analysts, bring them over up from a level 1 to a level 3, and then you get more value out of that without actually, you know, having to constrain your budget. So I think those are a couple of different ways that I would look at trying to prioritize your investments.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Merrick, I'd love to pull you into the conversation here too, if you have any other thoughts or anything you'd like to add to Jennifer's response.
First off, I completely agree with what Jennifer just said out loud. And to the more point, I'm going to add a little bit more of fuel to the fire. We also have to go back and realize that if we're going to leverage artificial intelligence to get through the gap, right? So the gap is a lack of workforce. It's either a misunderstanding or overclassification, whatever the terminology we want to use. Then that artificial intelligence itself, that AI model, becomes one of the crown jewels. And so beginning to take the time to secure that AI model, which is supposed to be the important aspect of how we're going to get through the technological breakthrough, begins to become maybe the first thing that we would go and lock down. So large language models, certain elements of artificial intelligence are very susceptible to adversarial attack patterns. And in fact, there's a lot of research coming out. NIST has put out some really interesting adversarial AI modalities that have been recently released, including the DoD CIO's office has actually put out numerous guidelines about adversarial AI and protecting them, because they believe that the AI is going to be very valuable, not right now, but immediately. So we have to start protecting them as if they're the crown jewels. So I would think that if a leveraging point is to say we're going to use AI to get through the technology hurdle for increasing throughput, then you may want to start by saying, is the budget into the AI going to be orientated towards making sure that infrastructure or that service or that platform as a service model is protected at the same level, since it's going to have such a traditional, or what we would say a heightened security response for detecting vulnerabilities or attack patterns? How would you do it, right? So do you create what's called a cyber black cloud, where you would consolidate all the SBOMs and all the different material information that you need in order to help the zero trust model work more effectively? And if so, does that become the crown jewel that you want to protect first, since it has that responsibility? I would think would be one of the things. So when you create your roadmap, which is to leverage what Jay was really on target with, is what is your roadmap for how you get to zero trust? May begin with what technology do you believe from a stack point that you're going to leverage to get to the promise of what zero trust is supposed to be, which is defense at depth. That means that every conceivable point you've accepted that it's possible that you have a compromise, or that you've already been compromised. How do you restrict access? How do you protect the most important things inside the system? So if we go down the AI route, but we don't secure the AI tool, then the AI tool now becomes the weakest link in the zero trust modality construct. And now we have another problem that we have to deal with, another technology debt that we have to resolve. And so to me, to you, to anyone that's listening, if that's your approach that you believe you are going to leverage, then make sure you understand that your AI is your crown jewel and begin to protect it from the get-go by design, from the structure beginning, and bake it right in. And so that was my 2 points to that. Because if you're budget constrained, you certainly don't want to do it 3 times. You really only have time to do it once. Hopefully it helps out.
Yeah, thank you. All right, my last question here, and then we're going to quickly answer a couple audience questions before we get into our round of key takeaways. But Travis, I want to go back to you and ask, what metrics or indicators can leaders use to measure meaningful security transformation under a zero trust framework?
Okay. Yeah, so the metrics. I would say that looking at your security personnel and your systems, you should have some sort of metrics about how they spend their time and what their workflows are. Is it time spent that's looking at systems A, B, or C? Is it aggregating information? Is it doing research? Is it writing reports? Are certain systems more of a demand on their time than other systems? And then as you start to bring in zero trust components in the environment, being able to see what is changing in their workflows. Are they now focusing on different tools, different systems? Are they doing more configurations on things? But being able to examine the changes in personnel workflow over time and see, where are you really gaining, some of the efficiencies? And I would hope with zero trust, because there's less opportunity to people to move through the environment, assuming the enforcement points are configured correctly, that is going to free up your security staff, which typically aren't cheap, to be able to focus their efforts differently.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jay, I was going to go to you next, but we also have an audience question if you want to address both at the same time.
Sure. In response to the metrics question, you really want to understand your kind of your enablement metrics, right? How many applications have you reached? What percentage of services are integrated? What percentage of your traffic is protected under an identity first solution? And understand the volume of your transactional and cyber events, right? Once you start to really drive observability around your overall IT infrastructure, you can kind of make meaningful decisions about investment prioritization, as everyone said, but the demand for IT is infinite, right? And budget will never meet that demand. And so, IT leadership is constantly in a game of prioritizing to the next worst fire. So trying to understand where your risk posture actually lies, whether or not that's a tool with something like RMF or intuition and cyber defensive monitoring, that will help you get to kind of where you need to be and how best to use those investments.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then in regards to, we had an audience question come in. So for anyone that didn't see it, Craig Stevenson's asking, panelists in the DoD IC include machines and services accounts referred to as NPEs, non-personal entities, and humans. What identity account management do you use to handle them so that the ABAC is best implemented? This is a little too many letters for me.
Yeah, no problem. So this is an in the weeds identity nerd question. I'm happy to field it. So back in the Air Force, when I was working pretty heavily on ICAM strategy, there's a couple of things to think about. First off, getting to real true ABAC is really difficult. It's not super well supported by a lot of end user applications, and a lot of things better support RBAC. Also, DoD policy around things like 2875s are inherently an RBAC construct, where an individual gets permission to a particular asset, thus giving you the role for access. However, you can think about incredibly fine-grained RBAC as ABAC in sheep's clothing. What I'll say as well is that the non-person entities is a real challenge. There isn't a there isn't a particularly great unifying non-person entity solution. You can get away with it in certain cloud ecosystems because the IAM ecosystem is relatively granular enough. And you can, and those cloud entities have a natural credentialing system through the kind of virtualized interfaces that they have. And so so within the boundaries of an application where one single organization controls that application, you're able to have very granular IAM roles. It's really when you have to go cross organization and you have to integrate it with kind of a non-person entity IDP, identity provider, where you get into a lot of challenge because there's, how do you credential it? How do you generate the business rules around generating those credentials? There are some solutions for that in the DoD-IC space. Specifically, the software CAs offer a little bit of a bridge to be able to get there. But really, there is not a great unified, this is like such an unsatisfying answer, but it's the thing I struggled with, so I'm passionate about it. There's not really a great unifying non-person entity business registration process where you can grant, you can either grant attributes or grant roles even for, ABAC versus RBAC to machine entities. And so all the solutions are incredibly kludgy. They're not particularly scalable. And I think this is one of those areas that we're really going to struggle with over the next few years, especially as we move towards kind of an API first future. As a shameless plug for the work we did back at the Air Force, the department actually published an API strategy that outlines how we were thinking about it at the time and how to use credentials that we thought were compliant with DoD policy to be able to solve some of this issue and integrate with both Cloud Direct IAM ecosystems as well as the sort of natural permissioning that happen inside of like Kubernetes. So go ahead and check that out. That might if you're trying to think about this solution space, you can do that. It's on the SAFCN website, which is www.safcn.af.mil.
Awesome. Thank you. Craig says you did a great job answering that question for him. And then let's see, Mark, you're worried about this survey. Just wait till the very end. We're going to have a fourth survey question for you. So as long as you respond to that, I think you'll be good.
Kristen, I'd like to add something to the sixth question. This is Dr. Wachorn, so I may add a couple of thoughts. Okay, great. So when we talk about metrics and indicators, one of the things that is often missed from this discussion, which is a very painful word, and I'm going to say it and then I'm going to cringe with everybody, is understanding where you take the advantage of your ROI from a compliance standpoint. At some point, there will be an audit. Someone will come in and say, can you prove how you met your security posture requirements as pertaining to Title VI USC 1500 G1. This is specifically the cyber posture requirement that's reported to the White House for the Department of Defense and others. So within that construct, inside the Zero Trust framework, there's actually what we call the Federal Information Security Management Act controls that have to be proven that you've implemented. So a great indicator is understanding how you can use the previously released NIST security control baseline that's associated with Zero Trust, and then your agency's implementation of that to go and show how those controls are being implemented. Oftentimes, this is the painful thing, because we have a lot of folks come back and say, we did Zero Trust, and then when you ask for them to prove how they did it so that we can go take the ROI credit from it from a business structure format, then we find out that no, we didn't actually do it as pertains. So for example, the coined phrase RBAC and ABAC are actually FISMA security controls that have been implemented by NIST. When you go and you pull down all the assessment models, which is actually a different separate process, this is where we actually will start creating those meaningful understandings of whether or not we did what we were supposed to do and did we do it the correct way. Now, in a previous discussion, we talked about automation. This is a perfect example. Then instead of, in Jay's old role, and I say this very kindly because I know that Jay was in sometimes an untenable situation, this is where the rubber meets the road. It's great that we had a strategy, it's great we had a process, but how are we measuring that? Unfortunately, the metrics and the indicators of whether or not you're actually doing it or not are actually pertained inside the FISMA modality. And sometimes those things are not in sync. And so this is very important where when you're going down this path of making sure that the security team that's responsible for making sure that you get to do the compliance piece, which is, again, a dirty word. I apologize to everybody on the phone and on the conference and the webinar. We have to make sure that we meet those criteria, because often that's when the DoD IG audit will come in and smack us upside the head and saying, yes, you did RBAC and you did ABAC, but you didn't do all of the assessments modality. And so subsequently, we have to go back and redo it again. And that's not to say that we haven't met those requirements. It's just a point to show that those metric and indicators, which the DoD has graciously put out and the DAF has put out, are mapped to pillars to show us how well we're meeting an objective and an indicator, so that we can go and show those successes are often broken down by FISMA. And we have to be very mindful of FISMA is a congressionally mandated, Senate mandated, and public law mandated requirement. And those are usually similar to the ISO 27001 standards, as well as the 27017 and the 27014. Those are things that you can use to show we are making progress and show that you're adopting the Zero Trust framework in a very reasonable way. And with automation, which is where the AI piece comes in, you can do that much more successfully and quicker without so much personnel, so you can retarget them on other activities that you need them to achieve.
Thank you, Merrick. All right, Jay, you can jump in real quick to answer about air gapped, and then we'll do our round of takeaways.
Yep, real quick. Typically, the way that we look at identity and air gap situations is to establish trust with a local IDP. That way, you can synchronize identity data from an enterprise when connection is available, or federate to get up to the second entitlement information. But in the event of a cut, you're still able to authorize locally. You typically do this with IDP chaining, where your local workloads all depend on a guaranteed connected identity provider. Typically, if you're looking at a if you're looking at like an edge deployment kit or something like that, you typically do that with like a local IDP in the same Kubernetes cluster, so you have guaranteed connectivity. So there's a bunch of different strategies for how you do that chain of trust and the relay, but being able to accept credentials directly or accept federated assertions pushed from an enterprise IDP provider is best practice for how that gets done.
Thanks, Jay. And for the other audience member that asked about this recording, I guess you wanted to take notes, it'll be up on YouTube. So just look out for on YouTube page and floating around LinkedIn. I'm sure it'll be promoted there too. But I just want to get into our quick round of key takeaways and hear from each of our panelists on what you thought was the most important thing we discussed here today, or whatever you want to leave our audience with. So on that note, Harry, could we hear from you to start us off?
Yes, thank you. So I guess my parting thoughts, right? So as a government technology developer, my focus for Zero Trust is being able to translate it from its whatever the application is to a language that the systems that are supporting the warfighter on the tactical edge can understand. So dealing with the realities of these legacy systems in contested environments with joint local and coalition interoperability challenges for me is the priority. And that's where for us to be able to implement Zero Trust, those are the things that we have to focus on for the implementation on the tactical edge.
Thank you. All right, and Jennifer, let's hear from you next.
Thank you. I would say that when looking at everything that we're doing within these architectures, that in order to start moving towards getting somewhere with your Zero Trust architecture, you just have to start moving, right? You just have to start going. So try not to focus on looking for the 100% solution in everything you're trying to do. Just try to find the next step that you need to take, and then the next step, and then just keep moving. And then eventually you're going to be making your stuff more secure with every single one of those steps.
Thank you. Travis, let's hear from you.
So actually, as going to riff a little bit about what Jennifer had said earlier about when resources are tight and what do you need to do? Well, make friends. And maybe your organization is going to be the one that experiments and works in one area of a deployment, and a partner organization is going to work in another area. You share the lessons learned. You're both able to progress, but nobody's having to shell out all the money on their own.
Thank you. All right, and then Merrick, let's go to you next.
So the one thing that I really want to hit on is that it's a journey. Zero trust is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a single day. It's going to be something that you work on over a period of time. And beginning to understand how the quantum aspect of this discussion is going to invade in this at some point. The ability to subjectively crack all of our current encryption is a reported known vulnerability that we are beginning to address at all levels of the Department of Defense. And there's a lot of new research coming out talking about how fast some of that encryption would fail. There's a lot of research by Dr. Mosconi out of Australia that shows some of the mathematics behind it. So as we begin to get to this stuff, imagine, if you will, as soon as you get done with the zero trust, you're going to start doing the quantum resistant stuff, which is going to be literally taking the zero trust stuff and starting to provide new application encryptor keys, new type of trust boundaries, new type of transmutation data sets. New data protection levels are going to have to be created. And so just to example, to think that we're going to do zero trust and now we're solved. Zero trust finds its foundation inside defense and layer, and it actually is an APT and insider threat orientated approach from the IC specifically, and that has now been adopted by the DoD to increase its overall security posture. It's very confusing. It's laden with a lot of subject matter expertise that is often found in binary discussions. So it's very clear that there has to be someone who is not just the champion for that discussion, but someone who can actually talk on both sides of the channel. That can go and talk to the IT individuals that are trying to implement this, that can then have the strategic vision of how they're trying to achieve that objective, and then more importantly, understand the business case that's associated with the zero trust. And when you're looking for that person that you're going to put in charge of your zero trust effort, start looking for a person that can talk on 3 different sides at the same time. And if you're confused, just talk to Jay, because he's very, very good at understanding the 3 different component parts that we were talking about. And the DAF lost a great leader in this discussion. Now, we were able to find someone that could to fill in the huge shoes that he's created, but it's very clear to articulate if you don't have someone like Mr. Bonsi that can do all 3 things at the same time and run at the same time, your zero trust implementation may suffer. So it's very clear you have to go down the path of understanding how to find the correct personnel for this particular environment and this particular journey so that you can be successful at the end. And that's one of the big things that I'd like to leave with the audience, which is it's not just I'm going to do zero trust. It's who am I going to pick to implement my zero trust vision, and how do I make sure that our successes don't cause a negative to our balance sheet, but actually increases our performance, and also shows how our customers appreciate the investment that we made in ourselves, which is an investment in them. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. And Jay, we'll end with you.
All right. First off, to my my former Air Force compatriot, please relay to everybody that I miss them, and hope to see them soon. Really, one of the things, you know, what everybody said is correct, right? It's a journey. From a leadership perspective, you really have to think that there is a massive potential for zero trust topic fatigue. It is going to take 5 years, 7 years to get to the scale and scope of everything that you want to do underneath the zero trust umbrella, and people are going to keep saying zero trust, zero trust, zero trust. We'll be saying this 5 years from now, and making sure that you as a leader communicate properly that this is a marathon, that there is going to be topic fatigue, and that it will still be important years from now, and making sure that you message that to the organization. But also, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Cyber defense is about imposing costs and complexities on adversaries to change the economic calculus about who and what gets hit. Anything that you do, whether or not it's just identity, or whether or not it's just automation, or whether or not it's just better compliance, whether or not it's cyber monitoring that takes advantage of machine learning, anything that you can do to tip the economic balance of power in your favor is a positive motion. And celebrate the wins where you can. Continue to take those small baby steps, as Jennifer said, up front, and continue to make progress as budgets focus and other operational priorities allow.
Well said. Thank you. And I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today and sharing with us your insights, and our audience for joining and participating as well. But a special shout out and thank you to our partners at Appgate and Optiv ClearShark for making today's event possible. If you enjoyed this one, you'll probably enjoy the next one, which is up on the screen. You can go register on our website, this time on public sector law enforcement. It's a whole summit, and it's going to be September 24th, starting at 8 a.m., going to 1 p.m. I assume this is in person, so go register there for that. And if you'd like to receive your CPE credit, this is important. Please be sure to respond yes or no. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye.